Hello, and welcome to The Entrepreneurial Musician, a newsletter, coaching service, podcast, and blog preparing today's musicians for tomorrow's realities. This is TEM288 titled, You're Charging Too Much and Not Enough. Thank you to Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for TEM. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you are not subscribed to the Portfolio Career Playbook, the newsletter from TEM Coaching, here's what you missed in last week's Quartet of Ideas. The most popular link was to the 5 types of personal projects and how you can justify pursuing each one of them, which was awesome. 10 copywriting tips worth stealing. I have learned at this point that everything in a portfolio career, everything in parenting, everything in teaching, everything in basically everything is all about marketing. And marketing does not mean anything dishonest. I'm not saying that you have to learn how to exaggerate or to, shine. What's the term? I'm not going to go there because I don't want to slap an explicit tag on this episode just yet. But these 10 copywriting tips are really awesome, and they're really basic, and it gets you kind of thinking about how you describe, whether with words or written down like on a web page or something like that, what you are offering. A wonderful, really quick article on when you should put effort into an email reply, and the corollary, which is actually even more important, is when you should not put effort into an email reply, which I love. And then the TEM tool that I shared this week was a very short YouTube video, which was talking about the very beginning fundamentals of graphic design. And I am not a graphic designer. However, I have watched a few of these things, and I have gotten a lot better at just starting to notice how things are laid out, and I'm able to make my own graphics. Not as well as somebody who I pay, but pretty darn good. And I started from knowing absolutely less than nothing. If that's you, or if you already know a bunch, I just watched this last week and I learned a ton. It's really short. I highly recommend it. So if you would like to get next week's Quartet of Ideas and just subscribe, it gets dropped right into your inbox. You can go to signup.tem.fm. And if you go to that link, you will also see that there is actually something waiting for you in exchange, which I've gotten really good feedback for. So signup.tem.fm to learn more. Okay. You're charging too much and not enough. How can that be possible? Well, that can be possible because there are always going to be people who think you charge too much, and there are also simultaneously going to be people that think that you don't charge enough. And what do I mean by that? I'm not saying that I voluntarily. Yesterday, I passed through the amazing city of Philadelphia. I went to John's Roast Pork, and I had a roast pork sandwich there with sharp provolone, very important to get the extra sharp provolone, and with greens, which there is spinach. In some places, it's broccoli rabe. It's one of the world's greatest sandwiches. Cost me like $15. If they raised their prices to $25, I would absolutely pay for it. It is that good. I did not give them an extra 10, and I did tip them because I'm trying to tip everywhere these days because everything's so expensive, and I can't imagine trying to exist on minimum wage. So I gave them a tip, but I did not say here's an extra $10 because I feel like this sandwich is worth $25. That is not what I'm saying. Here is what I mean. First of all, let's talk about the charging too much part. If no one thinks that you charge too much, then you are not charging enough, period. And that is non-negotiable. Here is what I mean by that, is that if every single person says, yes, I want that sandwich, I'm now thinking about food, I want that sandwich for that price point, and nobody says, no, it's not worth it, then you need to be charging more money. Why is that? If you're listening to this podcast, I am assuming that you are trying to make a living as a musician, whether that is exclusively through various musical outputs or whether it's just a part of it. I'm assuming that you are trying to maximize both your impact and your income from the various outputs that you have in music. And if you can make $1 from 100 different customers, or you could make $10 from 10 different customers. Which one do you think is an easier ask? It seems like, but the thing I offer, it's like it's hard to charge X amount of money for. Well, it is a lot harder, it's a lot easier to get $10 from 10 people. All you got to do is find 10 people to give you the $10 is a lot easier than finding 100 people who are willing to give you $1. And so you have to charge enough that you are going to realistically make a living from doing this, right? Where you have to figure out what is going to be the amount of money that is going to value your time and your effort and your stress and your overhead. If you have to pay for a website, or if you have to pay for a space to perform in, etc., right? You have to figure out how much money and energy you are spending, and then how much money do you need to make for it to be worth it to you. When I raised my rates, my lesson rates, this was 5 years ago. It was the first time that I had raised them in at least 8 years. It might have been 9 or 10 years. And every single one of my students, or rather the parents of my students, they all said, great. I didn't have anybody email me and say, thank God you raised your rates. But every single one of them, with the exception of one, which I'm going to talk about in a second, they all said, no problem. And then they kept on taking lessons, which meant that they felt like lessons for their child were worth more than I had been charging them previously, right? So, and like I bet you are, I'm really good at teaching lessons. I'm really good. I'm very engaging. I'm very hard on students while also being very supportive. And I'm not for everybody. No one's brand is for everybody, but for the kids that like really resonate with my brand of teaching, then it's a hard thing to replace, just like any number of you are a hard thing to replace, right? It's not just like there's not some pure scale of this is good, this is better. I am the best possible version of Andrew Hitt's private euphonium and tuba teacher, and nobody does as good of an impersonation of me as I do. So if that's what you're looking for, then you're going to be willing to pay me for it. I had one parent who wrote an email saying that they were discontinuing lessons. And I did this like at the over the summer, right? So I didn't like pop this on them like in the third week of March or something like that. And so it was intentional when I raised the rates. And she said, to be honest, we were not prepared for you to increase your rates by 20%. And right then I knew that that this was meant to be, because the words "to be honest" is something you should never write in an email, because it just makes you wonder what was happening before that part of the email. And I wish that child, of course, and even the parent who wrote the relatively strongly worded email, I wish them well. But I suddenly had one less student, meaning that I had more time to either sleep or to exercise or to spend time with my own kid. I love teaching, but if I can choose between spending an hour with my son or spending an hour with your son, I'm going to choose my son every single time. Like, that's why I teach lessons, is to be able to provide for him. So that's not really a close contest. Point is, I ended up making more money for teaching fewer students than I did. And I'm not accounting for like anybody who graduated or came back in, the next year. But overall, of the students that would have been returning, I made more money by teaching one fewer student. And so that was the right call, that price increase. So what do I mean by you are charging too little? Here's the thing. If I tell you that TEM coaching is now, let's say I've decided that my rates are now $25 an hour for music business consulting. What does that tell you versus, say, one of my competitors who is charging $250 an hour for music business consulting? Which one of those are you going to assume is going to be more insightful and more actionable advice and just better for you and your career? We are automatically assuming that the $250 one is significantly better. Not necessarily 10 times better. You could still argue that the $25 is going to be a better value, etc. But we are all assuming that the more expensive one, because if I charge and the rates that I charge, I have a lot of return customers. I will just say that for TEM coaching, I have a lot of return customers, which means that I'm doing something right and that I'm justifying the price point. But it's nowhere close to $25 an hour. And so the amount that I charge, I need to deliver. I have to be able to actually help people in a way that they have clarity as to what they need to do after we get off of the call. Whether it's a one-off thing, or it's like a 2 or 3 session package, or if it's an ongoing thing. And I have clients in all of those buckets. It has to be good when I charge a very real rate. And my rate for that is much higher than it is for teaching lessons, because I'm providing much more value, which is much more clearly delivering them money, right? If you come, you are going to make more money. You are going to have more clarity. You're going to this, that, whatever. People are always willing. I pay for that all the time. I can't tell you how many courses I have purchased that address one of those big topics. So if I am charging, if I raise my rates, someone's going to say, you didn't raise them. You raised them too much, right? Also, if I had raised my rates like $1 an hour, then I don't think I would have gotten that email, and I would have left a whole bunch of money on the table, right? And so, and by the way, I'm worth it, right? And so are you. We can hide behind low prices, because when we only charge $25 an hour for music business consulting, if you get off of that call with like 1 or 2, pretty good ideas, then you're probably going to be happy that you paid $25. If you pay me or someone else many times that, then you have justifiably have a much higher expectation for what you are going to be hanging up with, right? You are expecting someone who is going to, in a short period of time, because this is not a 4-hour call, going to really get to know you and your problems and your situation, and then be giving you very specific advice, not just here's what I tell every single student in their first lesson, which there's lots of teachers that do that, by the way. They're bad teachers, right? You have to conduct the group that's in front of you. You have to teach the student that's in front of you. You have to coach the client that is in front of you. And I bet I'm preaching to the choir. If you are listening to a podcast like this, then you're already self-aware. Realize that you have to be learning. And as I listen to so many podcasts and read so many books and read so many blogs, I'm constantly learning. And then I just try and turn it around and apply it to music. And then I talk into this microphone in your general direction. I wanted to close with the fact that if you try to appeal to people who value inexpensive lessons, and at the same time appeal to people who are drawn to expensive lessons, then you are in trouble. There is absolutely no way to market to both of those groups simultaneously. When people order off of a wine list, then they tend to gravitate towards a specific end of the wine list, whether they realize it or not. There are some people who enjoy wine and think that all wine is outrageously overpriced at a restaurant, and they will say, give me the cheapest bottle of red wine that you have. Or maybe it's even a little bit more specific than that. They say, give me the least expensive Chianti that you have, right? It's maybe not just completely open-ended, but they just want a little wine with their meal, and they think it's all overpriced. And so the more that they spend, the more that they are, wasting money. And so they go for the absolute cheapest. There are also some people who always go for one of the most expensive bottles, right? It's very common for someone. It's not that common for somebody to say, give me the cheapest one. They usually go up the price list. It depends on how big the list is, but maybe half a dozen from the bottom if it's a really, really big list. And so they're not cheap, but they're also not like the kind of people who are paying $500 or $20,000, for a bottle of wine. But people tend to have a story that they tell themselves where this is people like us. We do something that's middle of the road, which on a wine list is going to mean that it's pretty pricey. It's going to be the exact same thing with a wedding band. It's going to be the exact same thing with lessons. It's going to be the exact same thing with hiring a string quartet. There are going to be certain concert series that are going to gravitate towards the more expensive options, because that is something that the more expensive options tend to play at fancier places with bigger budgets, which means it's going to be an easier sell for them, because they get to say that the Borromeo String Quartet has also performed at the Rockport Music Festival, and they have also performed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the current, the series that we are talking about gets to associate themselves with those other fancy, if you will, concert series, right? And so even them, it's just like the wine list where we go for the more expensive ones. Others are, we just need a string quartet, right? It's been 2 years since we had a string quartet, and we need a string quartet. And so we're going to go with one of the cheapest ones, because nobody in our audience is going to know the difference between this quartet, who's really good and has a nice website and nice photos, versus this one, who's really good and who has a nice website and who has nice photos. And one of them is twice as much as the other one. You cannot market to both of those presenters at the same time. So you gotta pick a lane, and you gotta stay in it. But you just have to know that there are going to be some people, if you want to try and be one of those expensive string quartets, there are going to be some people who laugh at you or be like, but I can get this quartet over here for half. Like, how dare you charge that much money? But if you don't, then the people who would hire you for, by the way, you can make the same amount of money for less gigs if you get onto that like fancier series. And then once you get on one fancy series, the second one says, wait a minute, if they were on the Friends of Music series at Rice University, then we also need to have them, because we are the same level that they are at Stanford Arts series, etc. Right? So you see how this works. You cannot market to both, and the people who think you're that you're too expensive are correct, and the people who think that you're not charging enough and aren't worthy of their series are also correct. They're each correct for themselves. So you just have to choose. Am I going to be cheap? Am I going to be expensive? You have to figure out what it is that your unique value proposition is. And then you just got to go all in on that. Okay. Going to end with a quote, as I always do here. This one is from Mahatma Gandhi, which is, "The future depends on what you do today." That's a really great quote. I'm reminded of James Clear, who talks about how every single action is a vote towards what we want our future selves to do. And so if you want to get just a little bit better, long term even, I'm not talking about like by Wednesday, just a little bit better long term about graphic design, then maybe you go to TEM.FM, to the blog, where you can see last week's quartet of ideas, and you find that YouTube video, that like beginning graphic design fundamentals video, and you watch it. And instead of wasting, like 4 minutes, I don't remember exactly how many minutes it is, but it's short, on TikTok, or reading, for like the second hour about spring training news, since it's February and I'm very excited about baseball, then maybe you go and you watch that video. And that right there is a vote towards where you want to go. And the future depends on what you do today. So use the remaining hours of today wisely. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. As always, I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about TEM, you can go to TEM.FM. You can also go to TEMcoaching.com if you are interested in taking your career to the next level. And that's going to do it for another episode of The Entrepreneurial Musician.